Good afternoon there, or good evening, whichever the case may be, wherever you're listening. We have a worldwide audience, according to the statistics I've been able to see. And welcome to Unlock the Door Radio. This is your host, Michael Cross. And tonight, I'm going to go ahead and deal with an issue that I believe is of incredible importance. It relates especially to the issue of survivability. And I mean that in the context of survivability as a culture. I'm not talking about any kind of global climate change. I'm not talking about some sort of pandemic that might hit, something escaping from some lab someplace, or even war. What I'm talking about is that kind of slow, gradual decline. A decline that we've seen in other civilizations in the past, Rome, Greece, and so forth, in which if you really study the issue, you look at some of the stuff that the late Julian Simon used to write about population. He was a critic of the whole Malthusian population scare stuff. Said that the first thing that comes in when a society is about ready to start in its decline phase is a lack of births, a decrease in the birth rate, to where it starts at the top, the upper classes, and starts going down into what you might consider the managerial classes or the merchant classes, and then eventually creeps into the society as a whole. And yes, this is something that seems to be a trait that you find in societies. Friedrich Nietzsche, he wrote this. I believe it was in Will to Power. I can't be totally certain on that, but I do know he wrote that civilizations are like organisms. They grow, they flourish, and then they go into a decline. Most of them are not destroyed by another civilization, but they go into a decline phase, a weakening phase. Some people have called it decadence. And then, a lot of times afterwards, when they get so weak they can't hold themselves together, other groups come in. I mean, the Western Roman Empire was eventually brought down by more vibrant Northern Europeans who challenged its authority. The Eastern Roman Empire, the final death knell for that was the rise of Islam and the destruction finally of Constantinople, the city that is now called Istanbul. Now, the thing is, what causes this? I mean, what causes this decline that seems to go in, as we see throughout history? And we are seeing happen today, greater die-off of the populations in Europe than has ever been seen since the Great Plague, the Black Death. And the thing is that it's not like, well, just lots of people are just dying. It's that the old people are dying off, and there's not enough young people to replace them. And we'll get into that. But Vladimir Putin recently gave an interview, and I saw, in which he said that Russia was going to strive to stand up for traditional values. And this may have been in some ways a counter to a lot of critics who have condemned the law that the Duma passed and Putin signed, in which you cannot promote homosexuality among people who are under 18. I believe it's under 18. Could be under 16, but it's to minors. And I'll give you this much. It's pretty vague. I mean, what happens if you write a book in which there's a character who's gay and maybe, someone thinks, well, this is the character is presented in a good light and could influence kids to try out being gay or something. But regardless of, the law or what his motivations were for doing the interview, he said some very important things. And one of them was that he was talking about the Western Europe and its loss of cultural, religious identity, and that this was causing a crisis, and it was a crisis of character. And it didn't necessarily mean, he wasn't saying that everyone in Europe's running around, in some sort of decadent orgy, drunken orgy type thing or something like that. Instead, he's saying that when you have a crisis of religion and character, then people no longer kind of look at their culture and they think, wow, this is something that's really cool, and I can't wait to bring children into my children will adopt this culture and their religion. I'm really proud of my religion. I believe this is the way that's the proper path to God and so forth. Or just even just their family, and thinking, it used to be that people, I don't care even if they were totally non-religious, they still kind of got into the idea of having a family that would extend the strength and scope of their family, and they'd be able to be proud of, having these big family reunions where everyone gets together, and at least you got to identify with your family. But that's not the case anymore. Going beyond what Putin's saying, Western society seems to identify more with the brand names we buy and put on our backs or drive around, or those kinds of things, and not anything really deep, not something that transcends the material, something that we find that Martin Luther King once said, if something's not worth living, if something's not worth dying for, it's not worth living for. I'm sorry, I don't feel any desire that if I felt that some brand name jeans company was under threat, that I'd want to die to save that brand name jeans company. I wouldn't find that to be something that I would really want to do. And I don't think most people would risk their life to save a brand name company or something if, it was threatened by a fire or something like that. And the thing is that I think most human beings, would give their lives in a microsecond to save someone in their family. And I think quite a few people out there would risk their lives or give their lives for their beliefs. I think that that's still the case. But I think that what Putin was shooting at in Western society is that people are giving up that. And the thing is that if people are just kind of not independent, and I'm not talking about the rugged individual, the cowboy out in the prairie, but if people are just kind of doing their own thing and there's nothing else that's really important to them, then they are going to stop having kids. I mean, kids will be seen as a burden. Kids will be seen as something that just gets in the way. And what good is it if you don't have any real strong connection to your family, and thinking how, you really want to, you're really looking forward to seeing what things are like, for your grandkids and your great grandkids and so forth. Well, that's just going to have it's going to be kind of a situation in which you're not going to want to have kids, or you see no desire to do so. And then more and more people take that on. And then the children that are raised grow up in this kind of culture where instead of it just being something that you assume people will do, they'll get married and they will reproduce and so forth and keep things going, it becomes an option. It becomes something that, if I have time or I feel that it will fulfill me, I'll do it. And that's kind of dangerous. But I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about what the future seems to be presenting to us. And it's a future that's going to really, really seem weird. But I think I can support my predictions. I think we're trending in a lot of areas that, personally, I think this whole thing with gay marriage right now, where people are like, oh my gosh, this is so different than it was when I was a kid. There's going to be changes in society that I think gay marriage will be pretty much mainstream compared to a lot of the stuff that's going to come in. And I'd like to talk about this as we go on. And I'm just going to ask you, where do you think the world's going to be? And I know I've talked about this when it comes to transhumanism, but I'm just going to deal with human society. I'm going to touch a little bit on transhumanism. I'm going to talk a little bit about sex robots and stuff like that. But if you just think about what 2030 is going to be like, what 2050 is going to be like, and a lot of people in the audience here, I think maybe most will still be alive in 2030. Hope so. Quite a few will be alive in 2050 and beyond. Hey, maybe if you make it to 2060. Sir Isaac Newton did predict that's when Jesus is coming back. That's right. Sir Isaac Newton spent a lot of time obsessing with the Bible, trying to figure out when would Jesus return. And the interesting thing about it is they found these records not that long ago, really, in some archive. And he had predicted that Israel would be reestablished in, I think it was 1944. It was reestablished in 1948. So 1944, 1948, that's pretty close for a country that didn't even exist, since it was destroyed by the Romans around 71 AD. So, see if you can make it to 2060. Keep yourselves in shape. Try to avoid those fast foods and all the food additives and everything else it seems like you see in the store nowadays in the United States. But try to eat healthy and exercise and see if you can make it. Well, anyway, though, what you're going to see if you make it is going to be really astounding. But to find out where we are going, I think we need to see where we are at, where we were at, and what's taking place now in that trip that we call life. And remember, life is ever changing, but it seems like when it comes to societies, they just repeat over and over and over and over again. I was watching a documentary that was talking about Edward Bernays back in the 50s, where he was talking about where they tried to get an invasion, to overthrow the government of Guatemala, and they were talking, and he promoted the idea of calling the rebels, establishing rebel groups, calling them freedom fighters, calling the government a regime, an unrepresentative regime, and then the United States going in to support freedom. And the person that was listening to it with me was going, wow, nothing's changed. That's like Syria today. And I'm like, well, history repeats. But we're going to see some stuff that's not been seen in history in the upcoming years, and I think that's going to be really fascinating. So anyway, let's take a look back. I don't know. Why don't we instead of going back yet, why don't we take a look at Japan today? You're probably thinking, okay, what about Japan? Well, Japan, I would argue, is the most technically advanced society, at least if we measure technology by people adapting to electronics and all the new gizmos that are out there. Japan leads the way. But there may be some things that you may not like that they're leading the way in as well. I was looking at an article about what a social phenomena taking place in Japan, and I think it's taking place here in the United States and in Europe as well, but we just don't have a name for it yet. Well, it's called basically herbivores. And you're thinking, what? Sounds like some sort of thing from your biology class dealing with what food some creature ate out in the wild and its ecological niche. Well, no, an herbivore refers to, and it's been around about 8 years that this reference to this social phenomenon has been that it describes has been taking place, and that is a development of men who, well, they basically like that whole metrosexual look, but they kind of go a little bit further. They're really into grooming. Many of them are into makeup. Some of them, are into the idea of shaving their legs and stuff, and just kind of going the whole male model look. And really just kind of living for themselves. In some ways, it's sort of an arrested adolescence. The idea that, you try to hold on to what it was like when you were 16 or 17 and just hanging out with the guys and doing your own thing. And you know, it, not, these guys don't even have an interest in girlfriends or marriage. They're rejecting marriage. They're veering away from it. Now, the thing is, this is what's interesting. A lot of people probably think, okay, well, there's always been people like that, even in the United States. There's always been the guys that never grew up, and they never wound up married or anything. And then, they're the guys that sit on their porch when they're old and yell at kids walking across their lawn and stuff. When they die, the state takes over their house because they have no heirs. But no, this is a little bit bigger than has ever been seen. 1 out of 3 men the age of 16 to 19 consider themselves herbivores. And it gets even more worrisome when you're dealing with men between the ages of 20 and 30. The rate doubles. It's over 50% consider themselves herbivores. Now, if we look at that, that means if we can apply at least the labels that we give people, in our society, you got the Generation X's, you got the baby boomers. Those would be kind of like the John McCains. I think John McCain would fit as a baby boomer. Barack Obama is at the tail end of the Generation X age groups. And then after that, you have the Generation Ys, and then you have the millennials. So it seems that if we apply the Generation Ys and the millennials to these figures, then those are the young people that are either growing up, they're almost in that area where they can get married, or they're in their prime. 20s and 30s is when most people at least have their first marriage, and that's when most people have their children. Yeah, there's exceptions. Some people have kids much later and so forth, or they're on like in shows like on MTV where 16 and pregnant and stuff like that. But for the most part, people are having their kids around their 20s and 30s. But what happens in a society where men have given up on women? Now, it doesn't mean they're becoming gay or anything like that. It just means they're giving up on women. And, there's been a lot of reasons cited for this. Some have said that you don't have that same job security that you used to do in Japan. When you get a job at an auto plant and you knew you were going to have that job until the day you retired. And even when you retired, you'd still come to company outings and all this kind of stuff. There was a sense of the corporation and its employees were kind of one, and they worked together in cooperation. Because of the economic downturns that have taken place since the 1980s, that's not necessarily the case anymore. You get people laid off. You get plants shutting down. You get plants moving to cheaper countries to make stuff. That's right. That whole follow the money concept of globalization. It's affecting countries like Japan and South Korea, which used to be the countries where, American and European companies would go there in order to have cheap labor. Well, now they have their own companies that then go to places like Indonesia and Malaysia and so forth, and China. Well, another factor that's been thrown in is maybe the unfairness that many men feel when it comes to, well, if there's a divorce, maybe they might not get kids. Maybe they might lose their kids. Maybe they might have to wind up, paying something or losing some of their property or something like that. And so marriage has become somewhat risky for young men. And of course, that's true in America too. We'll get back to America and Europe. But what's happened is a lot of these men have turned away from women, and A lot of women are really concerned with this, like, hey, where's the men? Even though I will say this, the old idea of Japanese women, being extremely traditional and so forth. You think about these guys that in the 60s would marry a Japanese girl and come home, and everyone be just like, well, the reason he married a Japanese girl is because he wants someone that'll take care of him and that sort of thing. Well, they've become way more quote unquote modern. So the thing is that those stereotypes don't exist anymore. And you got a more egalitarian society. And with that, some of the guys over there feel threatened, and they feel like even though it's more egalitarian, there's still kind of this societal view towards if a marriage does break up, who's the blame? It's the man, and so, some of them feel like, why even bother? And so the women are left with far fewer marriage-minded men to go around. Now, of course, I guess they could adopt some idea of polygamy or something like that, but at the moment, I don't foresee that in Japan. I don't know how long it's been since they've had that in their culture. The other thing that's kind of interesting about Japan is the government's freaking out because there's so many old people and not enough young people to take care of these people once they retire. And Japan, unlike countries like the United States, Germany, and Sweden, is very negative towards immigration. They want to keep Japan, homogenous, culturally and ethnically Japanese. So it's very difficult for someone, even from Korea or something, even people that have some Japanese heritage, to actually go to Japan and to be able to function in that society as workers. And so you're having population decreases, and it's going to accelerate. But with this older population, the government is putting way more money into robotics and also research into automation in factories. Now, the interesting thing about that, and I'll get back to the robots when it comes to synthetic human beings, but the more, if you have less available workers, then what you can do is you can create labor-saving devices, robots that will do a lot of the jobs that people are doing right now. But the problem you're going to have with that is that when these things are made available, large corporations are going to buy these wherever they're at in the world, and they're going to install these, and that'll mean even less need for working people to do the jobs. That might mean consumer prices become less, but at the same time, you've got a lot of people that don't have the money to go out and buy the products. But we'll get that. We'll come back there in just a moment. So anyway, here you've got Japan, which many of the men there would prefer to hang out with the guys. I don't know, and their source of intimacy might be various forms of pornography on the internet. That's been discussed as being one of the main factors too. The low birth rate in Japan is the obsession with pornography. But let's see what's going on in good old US of A. And usually when we say the United States, we can see that the same trends are taking place in much of Western Europe. Now, the thing that you find in America and Western Europe is that a lot of the jobs that you're seeing are future jobs. Jobs that people can look forward to getting if they go to college and, if they're in America, take out some major student loans or join the Army or something like that. And then get out there in the workforce and actually get employed. Well, most of these jobs actually are jobs that men or women can do equally as well. Technical, academic jobs, medical jobs, and things like that. Not those kind of jobs that we associate with the 1950s, In 1950s, you had a situation where usually you had one breadwinner in the household, one earner, and that was the man in most cases. And if he was smart, really smart, or ambitious, or had good connections, he could get himself a really good job, business, medicine, academics. But even if he wasn't really gifted in those areas, he could get himself a job. Um, if he had a good back, good endurance, a good work ethic, showed up to work and could lift or push or put things together in an auto factory, make sure the steel got processed the way it should be, cut trees down, process trees in lumber mills. If a man had a good work ethic, he could come home after a long day of work and, the money he made supported the family. Yeah, they lived in they could afford a nice, comfortable, working class neighborhood house where, it wasn't in the fancy section of town. It certainly wasn't in the rich section of town, but it was comfortable. And it was something that, the family could raise in those days 3 or 4 kids and, live the American dream. Their parents had gone through the Depression and World War II, and here they were being able to, live a much better life, them as well as their parents. Then what happened was there were some changes that took place, and this era lasted actually not just the 50s, but into like the mid to late 1960s. Then economically, you wound up with a situation in which a lot of people, and there was a push for egalitarianism and feminism and stuff like that. Corporations liked it because there was more women that came into the workforce. That meant more consumers. The government liked it because more taxpayers, and it also meant consumers, taxpayers, and you don't just hate it when you just lose your train of thought there. Anyway, the thing was, though, that corporations liked it, government liked it, and it was beneficial for couples that were married, in which there was usually the man, had a full income. The woman could maybe work half-time or full-time, but most of the time it was half-time because you still had most couples wanting to have kids. So they had to make sure that there was someone at home with the kids at least most of the time. Of course, once those kids, and usually by that time it turned into 2 kids, when they were in school, then you had more of the latchkey children start, where mom or dad was out at work and then they came home. But anyway, this lasted from around the late 60s to the mid to late 1980s. Now, this is characterized by all of a sudden you had people who let's just say you had a couple grade school teachers, and they're married to each other. Well, if you have a double income, you might be able to pull your resources together, and then you could move into the section of town where maybe your neighbor was a doctor. His wife might be a stay-at-home mother. But here you were living in a section where your neighbors were doctors or other professionals. And it wasn't that working class neighborhood that maybe your parents, that you grew up with, that your parents owned. This was a nicer neighborhood, more of what we consider the modern suburban lifestyle. And that was made possible with people with dual incomes for the most part. And again, you could be a doctor or business person and still make it on one income. But this phenomenon lasted until the 1990s almost. Then you had something interesting happen. You had an acceleration of jobs that were traditionally those kind of jobs where people could work at, that were like extraction of resources or the manufacturing from resources into finished items. Those jobs suddenly started going bye-bye from the United States, and there were several reasons for this, and I'll tell you why. First one, during the Clinton administration, you had a situation in which there was legislation that was passed that allowed for easier trade with China, and China had just opened its doors, and they wanted to get in on this idea of making money. And so what happened was many of the jobs that usually men that could go in there with their biceps and backs and just go at it and get something done. A lot of those jobs started disappearing. And you think about this, it used to be in the 1990s, 1980s at least, and into the 1990s, you had companies in America that made TVs. You had companies that made microwaves. You had companies that made sewing machines. You had companies that made, in those days, VCRs. Young people are going, VCR. Anyway, you had VCR. You had these kind of companies. There were some being imported from Japan, but you had a lot of companies in America actually making these items, and they paid good wages. They weren't the best. They weren't like working in an auto plant, but they were certainly better than working in a big box store. And you could get by on those jobs, on those wages. You could get by a little bit better if you had a dual income, husband and wife both working, and this was actually becoming more and more the norm. So you could still keep that middle class type of lifestyle, or at least upper working class lifestyle. But these jobs were going out, and companies were shutting down, and the more and more the Chinese, the jobs were outsourced to China and Indonesia and later Vietnam and so forth, the more these jobs just started disappearing. Now, clothing used to be most clothing, and when I went to high school, almost all clothing was made in America. And now I think less than 5% of clothes are made in America, that Americans wear. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find too many toys or electronic items that are made in America anymore. But anyway, in 2002, we had the recession that kind of killed off what was left of the .com industry. A lot of the economic boom of the 90s was fueled by the computer and a lot of investment in these .com industries and the financial sector. The interesting thing is, it's not that our economy grew because we were making more stuff or that we were building our infrastructure. It was that money was being transferred around. People were making money off people making money. And 2002, because, right after 9/11, recession time, and that cut into a lot of what was left of those manufacturing jobs. And then 2008, well, that pretty much sliced, it was like you cut the legs completely off. And the thing is that those jobs are not coming back. These manufacturing jobs, you get Obama or others getting up, and you get the Republicans saying, well, elect us and we'll bring those jobs back. You get the Democrats saying, elect us and we'll make sure these jobs come back to the economy is going to recover. I'm sorry, they're both lying to you. I mean, unless we have some other innovation that comes in. Like in the 90s, we had the computers, for instance, or back in the turn of the century, we had the cars that came in and changed the face of America. Unless we have something really big, I don't know, maybe something in biotech or, synthetics and stuff like this. I don't know, but you're not going to have those kind of jobs anymore where, for the most part, you could just go in, get the job, and support a family on one income, and you are working hard to do it. Nowadays, a lot of times, couples now, they're working together. They can't work. They can't support even the working class neighborhood dwellings anymore. They can't live in those areas. But anyway, you had this, a lot of jobs disappearing. And you're probably thinking, how does this have to do with trends? Well, I'll tell you why in just a moment. Then you had environmentalism. That, you talk about like those areas of southern Utah when Bill Clinton wanted to make the environmentalists that helped him get elected, mostly through fundraising. He wanted to make them happy, so he closed off a lot of coal, the clean kind of coal, the kind that when you dug it up and you burnt it, it produced very little sulfur. Some of the highest quality coal in the world. He shut it down. This desert, got designated as a wilderness area. You can't use that coal. And then in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of loggers lost their jobs because spotted owls. And then for some strange reason, you had all these people, all these very, very liberal environmentalist types that live in the Pacific Northwest saying, why is it that we don't have social services for the poor anymore? Why is it our schools are closing? Why? Didn't they ever learn economics? You have a ripple effect. If you cut back on the base industry and you have nothing to replace it with that'll bring that same amount of money in, then that means your taxes are going to go down. And if you don't have as much tax revenue, then you're all of a sudden not going to be able to do all those fancy things. You're not going to be able to live this super utopian ecotopia lifestyle that many people yearn for in the Pacific Northwest. You kind of needed those loggers out there cutting trees down and processing them there. Oh, by the way, if you're really thinking that, well, yeah, but the environment, the transnational corporations with globalization, they didn't really get hurt that much. All they did was just get their logs from places like Brazil. And of course, you know what happens when you cut down forest in Brazil. But hey, if you got a supply and you have a worldwide demand, then guess what's going to happen to logs in Brazil? They're going to come down, and you're going to have ruined land, or at least land that won't grow more trees for a long time. Now, on top of these economic situations that were making it very difficult for families to make it, you also had some other trends taking place, starting in, I would say, like the 1960s, and that was the whole advent of the birth control pill. And, there was this actress from that era. She was considered I'm not going to mention her name because I don't have the article right in front of me, but she was considered one of the sexiest actresses of the 1960s. And she actually said that she felt kind of guilty that she'd helped usher in the whole sexual revolution. Not before what she said, but more, the films she starred in and stuff. But she said that, in times past, like the 50s, there was always this idea that when you got together with someone, you had to kind of analyze, well, what if this is the person you're going to marry? Do you really want to have offspring with this person? That made people a little bit more selective about the kind of sexual partners they had, and it certainly cut back on the numbers. So you were in a situation, even if you weren't inclined by your religion to say, no, I shall not, take this girl's virginity away or something like that, unless I'm married to her, you were at least inclined because there was a very strong chance that you could get this person pregnant. And did you really want to do that? And, the answer for most people was, nah, not really. But the thing is, too, that since sex was something that happened within marriage, people got married younger. And for the most part. And so you had a stronger sense of, okay, we got to get married. And then also on top of that, societal ethic was sort of, you get married, you stick together. Of course, the problem is a lot of our divorce laws were made during this time, and they were designed kind of penalize men who might abandon their wives for someone else or something like that to attack the immaturity of men. And we still have many of these laws when it comes to child support and other types of support. And the thing is, times have changed, and now, 2/3 of the people that call, that actually file for divorce, it's the woman. 2/3 of the marriages, it's the woman. But now we have a situation where we have more economic equality, where women can actually work and make more money. And at the same time, you've got a law that penalizes men. So many men are opting out too, just like in Japan. Many men are starting to say it's not worth it. Why should I put a wedding ring on someone and then risk a divorce where half my stuff goes away, and I might not be able to see my kids except for every other weekend if I'm lucky. So a lot of men are turning away here, and then now this is where the economics comes in too. Note that I said the thing about how the economics will affect the culture. Well, let me give you an example of how that works. Yesterday, I was standing in line, and there was this really tall woman, very attractive, extremely attractive. She was a head taller than me. Now, I'm not short. I'm above average, 5'11"-ish. So it's above average in America. But she was like at least a head taller. So I don't know, 6 foot, whatever. And, you get that thought that runs through your mind. Like, if I had met someone like this when I was single, would I have asked them out? And you know what? The answer would probably have been no. Because most of the time, women, for instance, will only say yes to a guy who is about the same height they are or taller. Men, on the other hand, will date women who are about the same height or shorter. They usually don't go for taller. Now, why am I talking about height when it comes to marriage trends? Well, the thing is, that's the same way. It works the same way when it comes to economics. Women, and I don't care whether you say this is culturally determined or biologically or a combination of the two. Women generally want to only date men who are at the same educational or economic level or greater than they are. Men will generally not want to date women who are too far ahead of them, that have a much greater education or economic situation. But they will date women who are considerably lower than them in economics or education. So in other words, a doctor will be very likely to date a nurse. A 50-year-old doctor gets a divorce. He meets a 22-year-old girl just graduated from nursing school. Quite common that he had no problem with marrying her. On the other hand, how many female physicians would marry a male nurse? The figures would be quite low. Now, I almost commented saying, how many female physicians would marry a female nurse? Well, I bet you even if you looked at same-sex situations, lesbian relationships, you'll probably find that they too follow this trend of a lot of equality and not a huge disparity in regards to earnings. But the thing is that this kind of is bad for women because there's a heck of a lot of women who are now graduating college. And remember what I said, the jobs of the future, the technical, the medical, the academic, more the information-based jobs, women can do those just as well, if not better than men. And a lot of men are not even bothering, with education. They're just kind of doing the Japanese herbivore thing. Why bother? Play video games. You're 26 years old, just sit back and play the video games, and if something comes along, it comes along. Doesn't it doesn't. And this has gotten so bad in America. With people delaying marriage, especially males, not just kind of wanting to live adolescence until their 30s or 40s. They're kind of living. Kind of skateboard. You sometimes see guys that are like 40, trying to act like skaters, not married. I don't care if you're married, and have kids, and you're out there trying to do those kinds of things. So that's great. But if you're just avoiding maturity and just living like you're stuck at 17, that's not so great. Well, at least if you're from a societal basis, I mean, because that means you go back to what Putin's saying. You know, societies aren't even reproducing themselves in the West. Now, the thing is that this also leads to another situation in which there is a huge surplus developing of women who are professionally trained. They get into their 30s, and there's a few men who have good money and jobs, and they can afford to kind of play around. Jump from woman to woman. Spend a couple of years with this one, a couple of years with that one, and so forth, because they can afford to be players. And then you got a lot of guys that are like needy. They're gonna be economically disadvantaged or whatever. And if given the choice between the two, when maybe the ones that are left that actually have jobs, but are, and so forth, have already gotten married. What do you do when you have a huge, millions, tens of millions of women who just, maybe they want to get married, but they can't. They want to have a family. Well, then you're going to see alternatives come in. This is where I'm coming into. You're going to see alternatives. More and more women, like in countries like England and so forth, it's coming here too, are opting when they're like 32, 33 years of age, not married. They want to have a family still. Because, you got to remember, a woman up to about 40, she can have that choice of whether she's going to have kids or not. Guys, even in their 40s and 50s, can still get married and have a family if they really, if they're lucky enough to find someone young. They'll marry them. But women don't have that option because, well, it's biology. So women are usually more concerned with, okay, I really want a family and I'm not married and I'm 29. What, I got 11 years left maybe if I'm lucky. So the thing is, a lot of women are just deciding to opt for a sperm bank. At least there you can, pick and choose. Okay, do I want an engineer? Do I want a doctor? Do I want an educator? Do I want the guy that has this color of hair or these kinds of interests or so forth? So that's going to become more and more and more popular with women wanting to have kids. On top of that, it's going to get even, I think it's actually, I forgot about this, it's going to get worse for women in another respect too, because the Japanese are trying to develop, robots that are synthetic and will take care of their old people. That's right, they're putting a lot of money in for that. And what happens when they start developing, pretty soon you got robots like in the TV series Battlestar Galactica, where some of them just look like toasters, but they do the dirty work in the factories and take whatever jobs that are left away. I mean, I guess a robot can do jobs cheaper than someone in China because a robot just needs maintenance. And on top of that, you may have some robots that look like the humanoid style robots in that series. A lot of guys may choose, oh, wait a minute, you mean I can have a woman who will fulfill, kind of Stepford wife type thing, except she'll be mechanical, she'll be synthetic, she won't age. I think a lot of guys would choose that. Even if it meant not having kids, they would choose that over taking a chance with women. So just wait for Japan to start turning that out and see, women faced with those situations. Now, again, I'm not saying all women want to get married and have families, but I think there's a much higher percentage of women that want to than there is men. And even there's a lot of men out there that really want to, but economically they don't feel they're in a position that they can do so, especially amongst the millennial and also the Generation Ys. So, you're going to see more and more women, opting for sperm banks. And I think you're going to start seeing changes in the way the family structure is, just the same as you saw changes from the 1950s where most people were monogamous. You got married, at least in theory, for life. And then in the, with the sexual revolution, which I will note was kind of promoted by the U.S. government and foundations and so forth as a way to reduce population. The thing is that there's where you saw multiple sexual partners, people that were, if you take a survey, they could say, oh yeah, I've had, let's see, and you ask them, can you name everyone you've had sex with? And they're like, no. Well, that was a big change from the 1950s. I think we're going to start getting into an era in which people may, either through economics, because they want to have the same lifestyle, or because of some other desire, you're going to see more group marriage. You're going to see more polygamy. You may have situations where, I mean, people are open to getting more and more open to this. I was talking to some young people the other day, and for some reason, the issue of polygamy came up. There was some news event that had been talked about. And this one girl said, one of the girls, she says, that'd be kind of fun to have, like, 10 men as husbands. And a couple of people laughed, because they're thinking of the implications of that. And then I said, well, do you really want to be picking up the dirty underwear and socks for 10 men? Kind of, playing around with some, at least, stereotypes that men are far less likely to clean up after themselves than women. Her friend makes a comment, well, the ideal, and she was totally, she was like serious. She said, the ideal would be to actually, or what I would prefer is to marry a woman and a man, and then you at least have someone to help you around the house. And the thing was, she was completely serious about that. 40 years ago, no young girls would say that sort of thing. Teenagers, I should say, not young as in 12, but 17ish, would say that sort of thing. Now it's like, oh yeah, well, that could work. And you know what? Even though all the sexual orientation surveys in the United States that Gallup has done and so forth have usually showed the rate of homosexuality and bisexuality staying relatively constant, around 2-3% for men, 1-2% for women, primarily gay or lesbian. Couple percent on both ends too that were bisexual. Well, the rate for bisexuality has really taken a jump. The last survey they did, I think it was like 8-9%. I think it was around 8% of young women under 30 consider themselves bisexual. You got to figure if there's a lot of women out there, nearly 1 in 11 or 1 in 12, that consider themselves bisexual, and that's the ones that actually said it on the survey. And you see that society is promoting it more and more and more. Nowadays you switch on a TV show or a movie or something, and a couple of women are sitting just kind of reflectively talking over a cup of coffee, and it's not terribly unusual. I saw one just the other day. It's not unusual. The other one starts, rubbing her foot against the other woman's leg, and the next thing you see the scene where, one of them's getting dried off and coming out, the other one's sitting at the breakfast table drinking a cup of coffee. Well, the thing is, this is getting more and more promoted, and I think you might wind up with a situation where, like this one person said, the ideal would be to have a man and a woman. I'll note that in my novel series, Freedom from Conscience, I actually do present a family situation like that. But the thing is that in the future, you may see this not just because people are experimenting because it's becoming more acceptable to do so, or they're seeing these kinds of lifestyles presented on the internet or on TV reality shows like, Sister Wives. You may wind up seeing it just because of economics too, because it might be that you can live easier if you have a polyandrous situation, two men, 3 women, or a polygamous situation, 1 man, 2 or 3 wives. The thing is, they can actually maybe maintain a higher standard of living, even though the average incomes are decreased from the last generation. And they have built-in daycare for the kids, so they don't have to make that choice. But career women don't have to make that choice between, do I want to have kids or do I want to have a career? And you get a lot of smart women out there that can be passing on those smart genes, and they're not having kids because of that, or they may be having just 1 kid. But the thing is that I think you're going to see more and more and more of this, because we have a situation in which we're going to have less men interested in marriage, and that's with or without the sex robots. You're going to have less men who feel that they are in an economic situation that they feel, like I said, stick your chest out there and go, hey, look at me, I can provide for you. And more women who actually are in that kind of provider role. And it doesn't seem like women are changing their attitudes. I mean, I don't think you're going to see many dating sites where it's female physician, and you contact her and you say, yeah, I'm a security guard or something like that. You might even say, well, yeah, I was really interested in biology. I love talking about medicine, stuff like that. I don't think most of them are going to, give you their phone number, okay, or their email address. The thing is that I see no change in that attitude of women wanting someone equal or greater than them economically, and men wanting someone who's not too far ahead of them, who's pretty much equal or has less. So they feel like they're kind of chipping in and helping the situation out, and without them, things wouldn't happen. Whether that's true or not, a lot of guys feel that way. So yeah, and you think you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna by 2030, I think you're gonna, it's gonna be more mainstream. When you see two women married, oh, you're monogamous. In a situation where maybe their friends are going over and playing at a house where there's, like I said, two men and three women who are married to one another. And probably marriage will become more and more a contract. You already see churches, because of gay marriages, saying that they're going to stop doing marriages in their churches because they're afraid that the government's going to eventually come along and say they have to do that, the gay marriages. So you're going to see marriage become more of a contractual situation. Well, when you sign contracts, there's lots of contracts where two people sign on the same contract. So why not three? Why not four? Why not five? That's something that's going to come in. And so this, I think, is pretty much unavoidable. Single parenthood is going to be skyrocket. Same sex, at least amongst women, the children at their local PTA, that's going to skyrocket. I don't think by 2030 polygamy will go all mainstream, but there'll be more and more people that will experiment and start it. But it'll be more on that. It won't be kind of like those guys that have 10 wives. It'll be more like a man married to two women, living in the suburbs, usually keeping it quiet. But then, given another generation, then it becomes more mainstream. It becomes more like, oh, they live this way, they live this way, they live this way. And the only, but still, I don't know if these things will offset the plummeting birth rates. Unless you have a turnaround or a change in societal structure. Even in Russia, Putin's turned around the birth rate. They give a lot of incentive to people to have kids, and birth rates, although still not at replacement, have gone up a lot since the disastrous years of Boris Yeltsin. But I don't know if the West will do that, because in Russia you can encourage these kinds of things, whereas in the West people are going to say, well, you're being anti-feminist, you're stepping into the economy, or we could just have immigrants come in and do these kinds of jobs too. They'll just look at it from an economic standpoint. And I'll have to say, without the people coming in and immigrating to a lot of the countries in the West right now, if they weren't doing it, the economies of those countries would be in serious problems, because they wouldn't have anyone to do those kinds of jobs that the people are coming in and doing. I'm not just talking about people coming in picking lettuce or something like this as a stereotype. I'm saying that population, if it wasn't for immigration, would be aging rapidly, because the baby boomers didn't have enough kids to replace themselves, and then the Generation Xers aren't having enough kids to replace themselves, and the Generation Ys, they're still living at home with mom and dad in their 30s, so they're not going to replace themselves. So anyway, we'll return back to this subject later. We're running out of time, but anyway, will hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and signing off for Unlock the Door Radio. Take care.